Hello and welcome to another edition of Personal Health and Fitness. I'm your host, Chad Marshak. My program today is Squatting 101, and we're going to talk about how to squat and all the different variations of squatting. Basically today we've broken it up into three different segments. Squats for beginners, squats for intermediate individuals, and then advanced squats. Henry Hurwitz is joining me today. Henry, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
We've got a lot of information to cover today. So we're going to go ahead and start with the beginning squat movements. People oftentimes don't understand mechanically how to squat, all right? And these beginner movements are actually going to introduce exercises to maybe people that they haven't necessarily thought about how to perform a squat, but we're going to teach them how to do basic squats. So let's go ahead and start off with the first exercise. Everybody squats. When you get up out of a chair, when you have to sit on a toilet and stand up, you have to squat. So mechanically, one of the most basic exercises you could do is teach someone how to perform a chair squat. So grab a chair, preferably a hard back chair like we have right here, not an easy chair. We want something that's going to support you a little bit better and doesn't have a big cushion. So you're going to approach the chair. Actually, you want to line your feet up about 6-8 inches from the chair. You want to make sure that when you sit down and back that your butt's going to hit the chair. Position of your feet. Let's go ahead and do this head on, Henry, so people can kind of see the position of your feet. This is really critical. Any type of a squat you're going to perform, you have to make sure that you line your body up properly. And typically what we do when we're teaching someone how to perform a squat, especially a parallel stance squat, like Henry's position right now, you want to make sure that your feet are hip width or slightly wider. As you can see, Henry's feet are slightly wider than hip width. The other thing you want to consider is the position of your feet. The angle of your feet should be appropriate for you, and typically they're going to need to be pointed out anywhere between 5 and 15 degrees. Now some people, they can place their feet straight ahead, and that's fine. But find that comfort zone in terms of foot position. The next thing you want to look at or consider when you're squatting is knee alignment. Make sure that your knees are pointed straight ahead, not caving in. As you can see, Henry's knees are pointed straight ahead. Henry, your pants are too long, just like everybody else out there. Hip position. When you squat, you want to make sure that you drive your hips back. A lot of people, when I'm teaching them to squat initially, as they go down, their knees go forward and their hips come forward. You want to make sure that you load your hips properly by sitting back. So unlock the knees, drive the butt back, not unlock the knees, drive the hips forward, okay? Spine angle is also critical. Let's turn here to the side. When you're squatting, you want to make sure that you don't round your back like so. You want to make sure that you have a nice straight spine, and you want to distribute your body weight through your heels, all right? Last, you want to make sure you keep your shoulders square and your gaze, your head straight. So your gaze is going to be straight ahead. You want to look out over the horizon, not up, not down, essentially straight ahead, okay? All right, Henry, go ahead and sit down and back. Point your feet out a little bit. Again, use that chair. As soon as your butt hits the chair, then stand up. Remember, drive the hips back, distribute your body weight through your heels. Henry's using his hands here by pointing his hands straight ahead, and that's fine. You can even start somebody off. Let's do it from the side now, Henry. You can even start someone off, hands out in front, by having them simply in a seated position. So if you're fully seated, make sure you position your feet directly underneath your knees, point your toes out slightly, and then drive your heels into the floor and push yourself up. That's really important. You want to definitely have that heel drive, which is going to activate your hamstrings and your glutes. These muscles, your spinal erectors. And again, he's got a nice spine angle. As you see, if you freeze that right there, Henry, look at that straight line. He's not kyphotic here where he's hunched over, all right? He's got a nice spine angle in order to protect his back and also activate his hip musculature. Okay, Henry, go ahead and stand up. All right, that is the chair squat. Now, we're going to progress that. Once you become proficient in performing the chair squat, if you're a beginner, then you can move on to a Swiss ball squat. So you're going to take a Swiss ball. You're going to position it in your lower back region against a wall. Again, same thing here with your feet. From the ground up, you want to make sure that your feet are aligned well, that your knees aren't rotated out or in, that your hips are square, shoulders square, gaze straight ahead. As you sit down, as you initiate the movement, you want to drive through your heels, distribute your body weight through your heels as you drop your hips down, pushing your butt back. Again, that's going to activate those muscles in your hips and your hamstrings. Nice spine angle is going to make sure that your paraspinal muscles work, protect your back. A lot of people are afraid, oh, I can't squat, I'm going to hurt my back. Well, you're going to hurt your back if you have bad mechanical habits, and that's why we kind of walked you through mechanically what you should look for from the ground up. Now that's the Swiss ball squat. Now today we're really not going to talk about reps or sets or rest intervals. We're really talking about the mechanics involved and all the different squats that you can perform from beginner through advanced. Yep. Now the next exercise, Henry, you going to do that for me? Let's grab another tubing. Yeah. We're going to do what's called a partner assisted tubing squat. Now you can use a regular exercise tubing, piece of exercise tubing. We have a super band here. I kind of like this better for me. And what Henry's going to do, he's going to loop this around my waist like so. And this really teaches someone, if you have trouble mechanically keeping your spine angle right, if you have trouble driving your hips back, this is actually a good learning tool and or a teaching tool. And so what Henry's doing, he looped this around my hips, and he's pulling me forward. So my body, my hips actually want to come this way, all right? So what I have to do in order to counteract that, I have to sit back or drive my hips back slightly, distribute my body weight through my heels, and it's going to teach me to drive back and down. So you can see my spine angle here, and you can see the position of my hips. Really teaches me to use my butt muscles, this entire posterior chain. The back side of my body is working here as I squat and as I stand up. Okay, that's good, Hen. And that's just a body weight, it's kind of an external resistance that helps you align your hips properly. Okay, the next thing I'm going to talk about, next squat, is a prisoner squat. Henry, you're going to demonstrate this. This would be a natural progression from the tubing onto the next, the body weight squat. So the prisoner squat, you're going to place your hands behind your head. Now what this is doing is that it's going to ensure proper angle of your spine. So let's turn to the side, Henry. Okay, so by interlacing your fingers, keeping your elbows back, go ahead and go into a squat. This really helps you maintain that nice erect posture through your spine so that you don't bend forward. A lot of people aren't able to keep that upright position through their trunk. They tend to lean forward too much. And this helps to also strengthen the paraspinal muscles, all right, and it activates the core musculature a little bit more too. So those 5 particular exercises that we just demonstrated are considered beginner, and we progress them from the easiest to the most difficult. Now we're going to move on to intermediate squats. And Henry, I know that you, I'm going to let you talk about the goblet squat.
All right, the first intermediate one we're going to talk about is called the goblet squat. This is the first time we're going to bring a weight into the equation. You don't need to use, this is a 20-pound weight, you don't need to use, I mean, just whatever you're comfortable with. Basically with the goblet squat, same thing, you're going to align yourself the same exact way. You're going to hold the weight just like it's a goblet, so it would be a cup. You're holding the cup right here. You're going to hold this weight close to the chest. Same thing, drive the hips back, engage, and this is going to help engage the core a lot more too, because you have this weight in front. Push the hips back, drive from the heels. It's a great intermediate squat to help advance.
Let's just check you out from the side too, Henry. Yeah, it's a nice progression again from the beginner into the more intermediate movements. And you can see Henry does a good job at driving the hips back. Now, Henry is one of those individuals where he likes to have his feet pointed straight ahead. Me personally, I like to angle my feet out about anywhere between 5 and 15 degrees, depending on what type of squat I'm performing. For me, that feels most natural for my hips. For Henry, to have his feet pointed straight ahead is most natural for him. Some of the things that we look at when we're analyzing the squat mechanically is initially I'll have somebody just perform a regular body weight squat, but I'm looking for what's going on with their hip musculature, what's going on with their spine angle. So one of the things that we see that's very, very common, especially when you apply a load to someone, if they're doing a barbell back squat or a dumbbell squat of some sort, is that I see a lot of hip translation. So Henry, go ahead and turn around and face that direction and perform a squat. And I want you to perform a squat where you have a hip translation to your right or to your left. And we'll see if we can pick this up. So as you can see, as Henry goes down, his body weight is shifting. His hips are moving towards the right side of his body, his torso. So his hips are moving towards his right heel. So typically what that tells me that he's got some issues related to his core musculature and his hip musculature. They're unable to keep a nice pattern from a mechanical standpoint. So he's got some weaknesses probably in his core and his hip musculature. Oftentimes you can correct that by simply cueing them, telling them, hey, your hips are translating to the right, and then physically grabbing their hips and putting them in the position that you want. So reestablishing that proper neural pattern, that proper biomechanical rhythm that they need to establish to perform it properly. If somebody can't do that, with the load, with their own body weight, and then you apply a load, it usually exacerbates it. It makes matters worse. It's like driving a car where the tires are out of alignment and you drive that car faster. What's going to happen to the tires?
You're going to get more out of line.
You're going to have more problems with wear and tear on the tires themselves. Same thing with the human body. Your spine, your hips, your knees, your joints are really going to suffer. So that's something that you need to consider. So make sure that your hips are square where they need to be and not let them translate to the right or to the left. And if they do, then you definitely don't want to apply a heavier load. That's going to make matters worse. You probably need to unload and figure out what the problem is.
Yep.
Okay? So now we had already addressed the goblet squat for the first intermediate movement. We're going to move on to the split stance squat with external rotation. That's a mouthful. But we're going to talk about knee angle next. We talked about the hip translation. So knee angle is really important when you're doing what we call a split stance squat. We've demonstrated parallel stance squats to date. Now we're going to go ahead and talk about the split stance movements. All right, so we're going to take this tubing, and this is a good training tool that we use. You can take any type of tubing. We're just taking a super band. I'm going to wrap it around Henry's knee here. Oftentimes when knees collapse when squatting, either a parallel stance or a split stance, if the knee were to cave in, it's because the external hip rotators happen to be weak. They cannot decelerate what's called internal rotation of the femur, this big long bone here. These muscles act as a braking system. Your external hip rotators of the femur, of this big long bone. So if you're doing a barbell squat and your knees cave in, or if you're doing a split stance squat and you're going down and your knee caves in too much, it's because the hips aren't efficient or strong enough oftentimes, not every time, but oftentimes in decelerating that movement. So by performing this split stance squat with me pulling Henry's femur towards me, he's going to have to fight. His hip's going to really turn on that much more to keep that knee from diving in. So I'm going to pull here lightly, and Henry's going to go into a squat. So he's really driving his right knee out just to maintain alignment. He's not actually driving it out. He's keeping it in alignment. But to do that, his right hip musculature and the lateral aspect of his hamstring has to work that much harder to maintain that aligned position. So therefore what we're doing is we're really training those muscles to do what they're supposed to do. And oftentimes we'll use this training technique or tool to help shore up any problems or weaknesses that might exist in the hip. So if I were to test someone, do a couple more, Henry, and I find that they do a body weight squat where, say, one of their knees might cave in, I may train them for a time period of maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, whatever time it takes, incorporating this exercise into their training routine to help iron out that muscle imbalance or that movement flaw. So that's a good tool. I said I wasn't going to talk about reps, but I am right now. If I were someone that had a problem with my knee tracking properly, I'd have somebody do anywhere between 3 and 5 sets of that particular exercise we just demonstrated, of anywhere between 12 and 20 reps. Now you're only using body weight. That may be a lot for some people. It may not be much resistance for others. You can also load someone up where you would have them hold dumbbells, perform that same exercise that we just did, where you're tweaking their knee in that direction, which is really going to make that hip fire hard. Okay? So we're going to move on to the bodyweight split stance squat next. We showed you what we would do before if they had an issue related to the hip. If they don't have an issue related to hip weakness, then you can just let them have at it in terms of doing a regular old split stance bodyweight squat. Go ahead, Henry. So again, knee alignment's critical here. I don't want to see his knee dive in medially. I want to see his knee align with his hip. Forward foot pointed straight ahead. Typically on any type of a split stance squat, your feet are pointed straight ahead. Let's get it from a side angle, Henry. It's also critical when you're doing a split stance squat to align your feet properly. You want to make sure that you have good separation between your feet. The distance needs to be appropriate. And depending on how long your legs are, go ahead, shin angle, etc. You want to make sure that this shin angle is straight up and down. So in the down position where his right knee is almost to the ground, you can see that his shin is essentially perpendicular to the floor. You want it nice and straight here and stand up. If you find that, go ahead and bring your feet closer. Let's show them the wrong way to do it. Now go down. If you see this position now where his feet are too close together, his knee really drives forward, his shin angle is no longer perpendicular to the floor. You may feel that in the front of his patella a little bit, front of his knee a little bit.
And the heel comes off the ground as well.
Plus the heel's going to come off the ground, and that's exactly what we don't want, because we want to activate his hamstring and his glute musculature, and the only way to do that is to get really good heel drive on the forward foot. Okay, go ahead and bring that right foot back a little bit more. Also, if you look, the trailing heel is off the ground. That's critical. Again, drive your heel into the ground. You're almost going to feel like your toes are going to come to the roof of your shoe. And again, by doing this is going to ensure that his hamstring and hip musculature is going to really be activated. Spine angle, nice and upright on the split stance bodyweight squat. How do you feel, Henry?
Fine.
You're not tired, are you?
Nope.
Good. Okay, we're going to go on to the barbell squat. Most gyms around the country, you see people doing the barbell squat. And to this point of the program, we've talked about all the other exercises that would lead up to the barbell squat. So if you can't do a barbell squat mechanically in a mechanically safe fashion, then do all the other exercises that we just demonstrated to this point, and then introduce the barbell squat. All right, Henry. So this I would consider kind of a middle of the pack type of an exercise in terms of where I would place it in someone's program, depending on how advanced or not advanced they are. So barbell squat, you're going to place it on your upper back, across your shoulders, across your lower trapezius, and same thing mechanically that we've demonstrated at this point. Henry, turn your feet out just a hair, or when you go down. I want to see something through your hips. Good, and he does a good job of just driving his hips back. All right, now turn to the side. Same thing in every other squat we've demonstrated. You've got to drive those hips back. You have to make sure that you drive your heels into the ground, and you want to make sure that you look straight ahead. He's got a nice spine angle here, and he's not rounding his shoulders. And that's it, Hen. That's good. Just hold on to that barbell for a second. Okay, so that's the barbell back squat. If you're using too heavy of a load, you may have issues related to mechanics, where your shoulders are rounded, your hips start to translate, your knees start to dive in. So all those things be aware of. If you're spotting somebody and you see your partner actually having issues mechanically, then you need to unload a little bit, all right? Don't use as much weight. If you're using too much weight, again, back to the alignment issue with a vehicle, that analogy that I just used, those tires are going to wear unevenly. Same thing is going to happen with your joints. all your vertebrae, hips, cartilage in your knee, etc., are going to wear unevenly, and that's what we're trying to avoid. Okay, now we're going to talk about the barbell front squat. So the barbell front squat, careful of your mic, Henry, don't smash it. Good. Barbell front squat, you're placing the barbell across your upper shoulders. Now there are a couple of different ways to grip the barbell performing a barbell front squat. I prefer this way. It's across what I call an X pattern grip, where you're crossing your arms like this and then grabbing the bar. What's key here is you keep your elbows up. A lot of people when they're doing this, a front squat, they drive their elbows down. You want to make sure that your elbows are pointing straight ahead, horizontally. Same thing mechanically from the ground up. From feet to knees to hips to upper body, looking straight ahead. Go ahead and squat. So the bar is almost going to go against your throat, all right? You're going to feel the metal against your throat. Careful, you don't want to drive it in there. I've kind of tweaked my Adam's apple a couple of times. Now the front squat compared to the barbell back squat, this gets a lot more quad action. And it forces you to maintain a more upright posture. Turn and face me now, Henry. So you notice, if you think back and compare the barbell back squat that Henry just did to the barbell front squat, go ahead and squat. The front squat forces him to keep his body in a more upright and or erect position. Look at his torso, how it's more upright. Where the barbell back squat, just naturally, you have to lean forward a little bit more. This front squat is also appropriate for a lot of people that have issues with shoulder mobility. If you're unable to externally rotate and get your arms all the way back to hold a barbell, doing a barbell back squat, this would be a nice substitute for the barbell back squat because it doesn't really affect shoulder mobility. Doesn't really come into play. Okay, now we're going to move on to the advanced squatting exercise. And the first exercise we're going to talk about is the overhead barbell squat. Do you like this?
I do.
Is this a good exercise for you, Henry?
Is.
Okay. So what you're going to do, now we're doing overhead movements. And the overhead barbell squat is performed by placing the barbell directly above your head. And Henry does a nice job keeping it even, okay? His hands are slightly wider than shoulder width. You can position your hands out wider or in a little bit more if you need to, depending on your flexibility. Okay, same thing from the ground up. Feet pointed straight ahead or 5 to 10 degrees out. Up to 15 degrees is even acceptable. And just go into the squat by driving your hips back. Now the cool part of this exercise that really works the paraspinal muscles. The muscles that run parallel to the spine. Turn to the side, Henry. I like, especially if I'm working with a lot of what I call strength athletes, people that need to be really strong and powerful, say football players, for example. This is a great exercise. Basketball players that need to be strong through their paraspinal region if they're going up for a rebound or cutting through the lane and going to the hole, they need to be really strong through the core. And this is a good exercise to train all those muscles that help protect you and ensure that you can complete the play. How did that feel?
Great.
All right. Okay, now we're going to move on to the overhead split stance barbell squat. So this is a natural progression. This would be the second progression. If you can perform it with a parallel stance, then try it with a split stance. Same idea from a mechanical standpoint. You want to make sure that you keep those feet parted properly. Appropriate distance, okay? Go ahead and go down. Same idea with the overhead barbell squat. Same thing. Keep the barbell directly over your head. The barbell is kind of centered over the midline of his body. And that's going to make sure that the load is distributed equally through his body so his hips really take the full load and his core musculature, paraspinal muscles are working hard. And that's an advanced version of the parallel stance, overhead barbell squat. Okay, next we have the overhead split stance single arm squat. You can either use a dumbbell or a kettlebell. So we demonstrated with a barbell. Now if we want to what's called an asymmetrical loading pattern, it just means that one side of the body has to work harder than the other. It involves a little bit more balance, a little bit more core activation. Henry, you're not going to have to do your leg workout today. Okay? So to set up on this exercise, same thing from the ground up for any of the split stance movements. All right? You're simply holding a dumbbell or a kettlebell overhead, like so, directly over your shoulder, elbow straight. Okay, Hen? So why don't you do about 5 reps in this position, then turn to the side so they can get the view of the other side. Okay, anytime you're doing an asymmetrical load, what he's doing, he's activating his core musculature on that particular side. A lot more balance is required. So his hips are having to fire a little bit differently compared to where both limbs are overhead. His core musculature, obliques, his shoulder stabilizer are working harder anytime you're doing a single arm movement. A lot more balance. Is that a lot more challenging using one dumbbell versus a barbell for you?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, good. All right. The next exercise we're going to demonstrate is a split stance squat with the foot on a bench or box. Let's just use this chair, Henry. You can also use a chair. Now, if you elevate the trailing foot, get into a split stance position, you can use a box, 12-inch, 18-inch box. All right, Henry. Same idea in terms of foot placement. You want to make sure that you step out far enough away from what the position of your trailing leg is so that the shin angle is essentially straight up and down. There can be a slight variation in your shin angle, but essentially it should be straight up and down. Again, load through the heel. Make sure that forward knee doesn't cave in. You want to make sure you activate your glute muscles here. Okay, that's Henry. And also on that trailing leg, you're really going to get a lot of hip flexor lengthening, all right, which is really good for a lot of athletes who have, not just athletes, but anybody for that matter, that has tight hip flexors. And the last exercise we're going to demonstrate is a single leg squat. A single leg squat is performed by, very easy, you're balancing on one foot, all right? Go ahead, Henry, and get set up. So what you're going to do is you're going to set up on one foot. You're going to balance, drive through the heel. Same thing with any other squat. You want to make sure that this knee angle, you don't want to let your knee dive in. And this is a little bit of a challenge for some people that maybe are flat-footed, that have a foot that, say, overpronates. And if it overpronates, it's going to cause the foot to dive in, which is going to cause the knee to dive in. Sometimes that's attributed to the reason that happens is, again, the external hip rotators might be weak, not really able to control this femur from diving in or coming out. All right, so in time, you can strengthen those muscles, which will allow you to do a single leg squat. Let's go ahead and get that one from the side, Hen. So face that direction. Let's go on your right leg again so they can kind of get an idea of what's going on. And again, same idea, drive the hips back, nice spine angle. Anytime you're doing a single leg squat movement, a lot more balance. The hip stabilizers are working a lot harder. It's just more of a balance challenge. Plus, it's kind of fun. Henry, I want to thank you for helping out. I know your legs are probably toast.
Fine.
You did a good job. If you have any questions about what we do here at Body Symmetry, make sure you call us. Please also check out our website, freefitnessvideos.com. We've put a lot of work into it. It's a great website, huge library of exercises. Thanks again for joining me on another edition of Personal Health and Fitness. Until next time, I'm your host, Chad Marshak. Hey, Quinn and Riley.